What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Daniel's Experience. My name is Daniel. This is another episode of the podcast where I, the psychology student, talk about different facets and factors in life: philosophy, meaning, suicide, suffering, goals, motivation, what it all means, or so we try to decipher together. Folks, a lot of things have been going on recently. First of all, in sports, Argentina beat Brazil in Copa America final. Italy beat England in the European Championship, and Conor McGregor broke his leg against Dustin Poirier. Did you see that stuff? Was that any interest to you at all? And if you did, what were your takeaways? Were you happy that McGregor lost? I guess most people would probably be upset that the main event ended like that. I guess now you're thinking, well, what are the repercussions and what's it going to be and what's the next bout's going to look like for Poirier and for McGregor? You got guys like Charles Oliveira, Michael Chandler, Justin Gaethje. I would argue Kevin Lee isn't too far off in the mix of things, so that should be really interesting to see how things end up going with those guys. Man, Euros was crazy. I don't know if you folks watched, like, how often you guys watch soccer or football or something, but that was nuts. That was really, really wild. A very close game between Italy and England, where unfortunately, for England's sake, they lose to penalties, in penalties. And the last three people to take the penalties are solid players, right? The players are Marcus Rashford, Jadon Sancho, and Saka. Now, the unfortunate thing was this. Countries in Europe, they're not the most open and welcoming to minorities, especially if your color of your skin is not white. A couple of those countries include Germany, Austria, Poland, Russia, and England. Now, I'm not saying that racism only exists there, but here's a couple of things that we have to take a note of. When that game ended, one of the headlines, I believe it was Australian news place, actually had the headline that said, 3 black players missed penalty, England wins Euros. Now, here's the thing. To many people hearing that, it's correct. They're not wrong. They were all, you wouldn't call them white. The problem with that statement is that you are inferring that there's a causality there, that the color of their skin had somehow impacted their ability to play football. The people who go to school, the people who go to university, college, know that this is factually incorrect. This, at best, is a correlational study and not a experimental. Where in experimental, it's easier to identify causation. Let's play this out. Let's say those 3 guys, they're all black, they missed their penalties. Therefore, we conclude that black guys can't play football, right? That might sound wild to you, but check this out. What if I say the exact same thing and I say, John is really religious. John prayed today. 2 hours later, he went and found a wallet full of money. He said, because I prayed, I found the amount of money. Like my praying led to me finding that money in the street. What I've just done is I've taken 2 things that happened, or John's taken 2 things that happened coincidentally, and because they happen at the same time, they must be related. One dude beats up another dude and he ends up in jail. Turns out he's a Gemini. Coincidence? Absolutely. Absolutely it's a coincidence, because we know there's a relationship where we can't identify causation. Let's say those 3 black players, let's say they were all Nike players as well. They're all wearing Nike shoes. You could also say that, okay, Nike players just aren't good at penalties. What if those 3 players, I believe they're all under the age of 24. I believe one's 19, one's 21, one's 23. So you can say players under the age of 24 are bad at penalties. You could also say players who come in after the 118th minute, like Rashford and Jadon Sancho did, are bad at So do you see what I mean? How there's a plethora of things? And it's like you saying that the color of their skin impacts someone's ability to do something. Sounds as wild to me as saying, hey man, I mean, here's the thing. We don't know, right? We don't actually know. We haven't done any research to suggest, hey man, in terms of skill-wise at something, that genetics play a role, but skin color, or I haven't seen it anyway. So if you find anything, you gotta send it over to me. But there's a real problem with looking at things that are correlational, right? The problem there is just because there's 2 things involved doesn't mean that there's only 2 things involved. There could be other things that you could be missing. And that's really, really important to take a note of. And if you ever really wanted to study the penalty kicks of black people compared to white people compared to others, you'd have to get like a giant sample size, right? You just looked at 3 people taking a penalty. You have to get at least, let's say, 1,000 people of one color, 1,000 people of another color, put them in the same environment, have each of them take penalties. What's the word I'm looking for? You use aggregation, which basically means average it out, and then on average you could say, oh, these types of players scored more than those types of players. But even with that, there's so many variables in terms of age, experience, playability. Like imagine if all of your white players you got from the top teams in England, like Manchester City, Manchester United, Arsenal, and then all the black players, let's say you got from like lower leagues. So, you know, one problem would be that you would attribute their poor playing to the color of their skin as opposed to just that individual player from just like a lower level team. Does that make sense? So there's a lot of things that go into it. But yeah, man, sports was wild. I was unbelievable when I saw that stuff. And racism has been a big thing in football, I mean soccer, for quite some time now. It's really unfortunate, you know. It's really, really unfortunate. And I think racism doesn't have a place like anywhere. And it just since the dawn of time, man, like when the fans of the other team were at the stadium and they were booing and cheering, it wasn't just, hey, you suck. It was throwing banana peels at the black players, calling them monkeys, you know, just shouting things that are homophobic, racial slurs, and there's absolutely no place for that in my opinion. Races plays no. All those bastards. There was a couple of times, folks, in those Euro games where people took a knee right before the whistle, and the fans, the English fans especially, they would boo every single time. Their argument is political things or racism or anything to do, any politics, religion, racism should not be involved in football. Thus, you should not take a knee. It wasn't about just BLM and cop violence. It was just everybody against racism, no matter your nationality, race, or whatever. People would boo. And I remember this because I really remember the English fans booing every time the English team took a knee and whoever else they were playing took a knee right before the whistle went off. And my idea was this. I agree. I don't think there's a place for religion or racism or things of that nature in games. However, because being racist, I don't even want to say it's the norm, but it's such a... You're not surprised when you hear racist chants or sexist chants or homophobic chants at a football game. That I'm glad that they did take knees before starting off. Because whoever boos and says, man, we don't need any political things, you know, you're trying to hijack this occasion to make it all about something else, is like, I completely agree with you. Racism has no place in any sport. That's why we have to take a knee. If you didn't shout those racial slurs, nobody would be taking a knee, right? You're the cause of this action. That's why we're doing this. So anyways, folks, that's my little piece on kind of sports and what's been going on there. The fight game, football, that's been interesting. The NBA games are going on right now. I believe it's Bucks versus the Suns, but I'm not going to pretend like I know anything about basketball. So I believe the little that I've heard, the Suns have never won the NBA championship. But hopefully that's correct information. So that should be interesting. We'll see what happens there. Folks, I've been doing this podcast for quite some time. I've been doing it for a good bit now. I think the first episode came out January of 2020, I want to say. Or no, December of 2019. Yeah, that sounds about right. It's crazy, man. It's insane how long I've been doing this, and I've really just thinking about consistency lately. And you know, when you do anything like either start a podcast, start playing violin, playing golf, playing chess, doing yoga, eventually over time you start to get really, really good at things. For example, one thing that I've noticed is I've always thought I've been a good speaker. I thought speaking was a strength of mine. But if you were to compare some of the episodes that I'm doing now compared to a year and a half ago, I feel a lot more confident on camera, which is a lot to say because I already felt confident on camera beforehand. But I focused on little things. So like I'd watch older episodes and say, okay, I say quite a bit. Or when I get excited, I talk really, really fast. Let me slow down. Let me, let the idea breathe a little bit, as they say. And just little things, right? I'm sure the setup has changed. It's not a $5,000 studio by any means, but I feel like it's a little bit more cleaner. It's a little nicer to look at when compared to the earlier ones starting out. And in one sense, there's two ways to look at starting something new. One of the things is that you're looking at it and you go, man, this is awesome, right? So in the world of goals, you've got two types of goals. You have mastery goals and you have performance goals. Mastery goals are this. I do this podcast and I go, I want to just learn as much as I can about podcasting, about talking, about editing videos, about different concepts, like the art of taking a concept and breaking it down so that if someone who is a nurse or a professor in psychology, they listen and they go, yup, that is factually accurate and that makes sense. And an 11-year-old could listen to the podcast hypothetically and go, okay, I understand like where he's going to. Right? Again, episode to episode differs. But being able to explain a really abstract idea that's far off and that for maybe people who are in psychology understand, but many of the general people maybe just haven't heard of. And to be able to break that down, I think is awesome. I think that's really, really good, and it's a skill in and of itself. And I think just learning and growing is awesome. Now, you have performance-related goals. Performance-related goals, is right in the title. It's not so much about the abstract, the learning, the getting better, but it's about seeing results. It's about having something. So for example, a mastery goal is just, man, I want to learn as much as I can about psychology. A performance goal would be, I want to start making money from the podcast by 2023, for example. Or I want to have a certain amount of listeners by June of whatever, right? So it's very objective. It's very, you're trying to get a result. You're trying to obtain something. Think of it as registering in a course at university or college. Mastery goal is, I want to learn as much as I can about this because I'm interested and I think it's important, versus I want to get a 86% at least in this course. That's more performance goal or result oriented goal. When I started out, I was very performance focused. I was, I gotta have this many followers and this many listeners per episode and this many this and that. But as it's really come by, I've become a lot more of a very more mastery goals with respect to what I do on the podcast. And different people can look at it different ways. Here's my take on it. If you do something that you love, you should have a healthy relationship with it, right? You don't want anything to feel like a chore. You don't want, at one point I was working out so much that it became like a chore and I felt like I had to do it, and I ended up taking a break for about a month and a half. It wasn't until recently that I kind of got back into it the last 2-3 months, and I started looking at it again as, man, hey, this is something that I enjoy doing, right? And I think it's just really important. Whatever you are doing in life, whatever hobby you are pursuing, just remember, if you can change a little thing around, right? How can you take what you're doing and make it fun? How can you incorporate different things, change it up, change the routine, adapt, modify it, completely drop a hobby, pick up a new hobby to make it fun for yourself so you keep on going? If I didn't enjoy making these podcasts, man, I would have stopped a long time ago. It's really not about the money. For me, I don't know about the other people making it. I'm not making millions of bucks on these things. It's just finding something that you enjoy doing, genuinely enjoy doing, and that you are intrinsically motivated to do. Not because my boss is going to get mad if I don't upload one of these. Not because I feel like I have to, but because I want to. Because again, podcasting is a thing for me, but I encourage you to find that thing that you just enjoy doing. And whenever you find that thing, you have the beauty of testing your own discipline and your consistency. How long can you do this thing that you're doing? How long can you push it out? And I think over time, regardless of what happens with followers, or if you ever perform on the big stage, if you're talking about sports, the very fact that I think you get better at something over time is an accomplishment in and of itself. Now, it depends. What are your goals, right? Like what is your aim, right? Are you attempting to become the best inserted chess player in the world? Okay, well then you look at it a certain way. Or are you just trying to pick up a new skill and get so freaking good at it that let's say you can beat everyone in your family, and that you can teach people and you can teach them well. Right? So now you got certain levels to it. And I think when you start to think of it like that, it's really hard to think about wasting your time on anything. I used to look at something like, for example, I had a buddy of mine, what was he doing? I think he was doing taekwondo or judo. Anyways, he was doing it. He said, man, I did it for a year and a half and I stopped. I felt like I wasted a year and a half. And I said, why do you think that? He goes, well, it would have only made sense if I would have done judo for the rest of my life, right? If I was going to quit, I might as well just not have started to begin with. I would challenge that sort of ideology by saying the very fact that you started for a year and a half, you still learned valuable things. And I would even argue, again, it depends on the person, that the socializing that you did, figuring out what the basics are. Now, if someone says, let's say it was judo, you can talk a little bit about judo. Your knowledge compared to mine, who's done 0 judo classes versus yours, right? It's night and day. So even if you view it as, oh man, I shouldn't have even started if I was going to quit after a year and a half, I would argue that there's positives in there. Maybe the friends that you met, maybe the discipline, maybe the things that you learned about yourself. So I really do think it's the perspective and the angles and the way that you approach things can be really beneficial to you and to your life. And don't think about it as, if I do it, I got to be the best at it. If I do it, I got to do it for the rest of my life. Not necessarily. If you do it, you should try your best. You should always try your best. But I think there's learning in a lot of these outcomes. I've also heard this in relationships. People will say, man, girls will say, I can't believe I wasted a year of my life with them. Like, interesting. That's always interesting to me. I guess when I think of wasted from her perspective, I think of, oh, he's a potential long-term life partner that I want to grow old with and, get married with. And then when it breaks off, it's like, well, I wasted all this time with him, and now I got to go find a new student and start from level 1. That's one way to look at it. But another way to look at it is, even though you folks broke up, you still had good memories along the way, right? There were ups and downs, but there were definitely ups. And to just throw that all away and put that into one category of it sucked, it was a waste of time, I wish it never happened, I think it's an unfortunate way to look at it. I think, a very stoic approach is there's no such thing as a good event or a bad event. Take that as you will. But everything is about how you interpret it. You go out there, you get mugged. They take your wallet, they take your phone. And you come home and you say, this was one of the worst days of the year. I got mugged. That was terrible. I go out there, I get mugged. They take my phone, they get my wallet. I come home, I say, wow, this was one of the most interesting days of the year. I learned something about myself. I learned the importance of taking martial arts and self-defense classes. Again, I know I'm exaggerating. That's a bit of a far-fetched one. But do you understand what I mean? So it's not the events necessarily, but it's what you take away from them. Give or take. Again, well, what would you do if your best friend died? Again, you shouldn't just throw everything on everything. You shouldn't throw that concept on everything because it's extreme, but you get the general idea. So what I'm trying to say with this long-winded rant is, once you do something and you're consistent with it, give or take, I think the sheer fact of how much you've learned, regardless of the results, can be a beauty in and of itself. With whatever you're doing at work, in a relationship, any hobby. I think this is more specific to hobbies. And you can just look back and go, wow, I've gotten this much better. I've learned this much more. I've become this much greater. And whatever that may be for you. And I think that's great. I really do. I think progress, is amazing. They say it's not about the destination, it's about the journey, right? It's essentially it's the progress, right? It's getting there. I think that makes the world of difference. So if you're in a place right now where you've been doing something for 2, 3, 4, 5 years and you feel like you're not getting those results, look back at it and go, well, either you can look at it as, well, what am I doing wrong? What could I do better? But also, it doesn't have to be a bad thing. You just have to sit back and go, when I started, what was my expectation? What did I want from this? And now, what am I happy with? And what do I want to go for? Be crystal clear with your goals. Because if you're not crystal clear with your goals, you'll never know if you achieved them or if you failed to achieve them. But if you're crystal clear, there's no lying to yourself. You know exactly if you met your goals or if you didn't meet your goals. So if your goals are performance-based, and there's a certain number, it's very easy to go, I didn't get it or I got it. So that's a benefit there. If it's mastery goals, it's harder, right? Because there's no number, there's no, but maybe if you just, because you know yourself, you know if you're getting better or not. Even though it can be hard to tell, you can maybe ask people around you if they've seen you doing it, or if you look back to, like, let's say your first cha-cha dancing session and your recent cha-cha dancing session, I'm sure that you're going to see progress, and progress in and of itself, I think, is something to be cherished and to be rewarded. So as long as it's something that you enjoy doing and you're consistent about it, be crystal clear about what you want from what you're doing and why. And I think you're good to go. I really do. Folks, I'm going to call it here. Keep it nice, short, sweet. Short, my 16 minutes is a short one. Man, that's a short Daniel Teaches episode. All right, folks. Take care of yourself, stay safe, and I will see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.